When you start trying to reimagine your work, one of the questions that we all have to face is why we work at all. So I ask you, why do you work? What was it in God's creative purpose that put you in that place of working? I know some of you would say, Bruce, sometimes I don't know. I think most of the time I'm just working for a paycheck. And I have noticed that every single one of us like to eat, and paychecks make eating much more easily possible. That's true. But is there something more about why we work? I'm really indebted to a lot of people who've gone before me and are at the same period of history as me, who have written about work and wrestled with those issues. Howard Hendricks and Bob Buford and Tim Keller and Karen Alsdorf, who have written prolifically about why we do what we do and how all that fits together and how we can honor God in that and experience His pleasure in it. But today, to answer why we work, I want to take us back a whole lot more centuries in our past to see why we work, because to know why means you need to see the origin of work. If you're going to look for origins, the place to be is Genesis. So if you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to Genesis 1 and take a look with me at what the Creator decided and had to say about your purpose in this world. We have all kinds of work that feels meaningful, and we have work that sometimes just feels like we're going through the motions looking for a paycheck. So understand why is really important. This is what God says in His Word. Starting in verse 27 of Genesis 1, it says this: God created human beings in His own image. Those words are the most important you're going to hear. In His own image. In fact, He does something here very Hebraic in repeating the same thing. In the image of God, He created them, male and female, He created them. Then God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. And then God said, look, I've given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food. And I've given you every green plant as food for all the wild animals, the birds in the sky, and the small animals that scurry along the ground, everything that has life. And that is what happened. Then you have this wonderful verse, 31. Then God looked over all that He had made, and He saw it was very good. Now, it is the purview of science to figure out how God pulled all that off. It is the purview of the Bible to tell who, what, why, which matters far, far more. And in this description, God says that He made everything and it had a purpose, that He designed, that He used His best creativity, His energy, His character, His love. All those things went into this creation, and you have all these attributes or aspects of the creation. But there's only one that carries His resemblance, made in His image. There's only one part that seems to have that spiritual, emotive resemblance of the Creator. Only one part. And it is that one part that is given a job. And that job is to govern the world and govern its part, to be part of sustaining that world. Why do we work? Because the author of humanity, the one who made us in His image, He worked. And so we bear that resemblance today. We work in part because the one who made us worked and did His most incredible work with the nature that you get to see, the mountains, the seas, the air, all those things. And today, the only way to really do good work is to be someone who is made in His image, to be that human in that process, reflecting His character, reflecting His values, reflecting His intentions, and ultimately reflecting His image. Now, have you ever been told that you bear the resemblance of somebody in your family? Have you been told, you look just like your dad, or, I see your mama written all over you, or, when you walk, there are certain things about you. Every single one of us have physical attributes. They're part of our DNA, and they begin to reflect. And if you look at parents and you start comparing pictures, we all see resemblances, certain things that remind us of somebody else. Now, some of you like that. Some of you hated that. Oh, I don't want to be like that. My boys wanted to be like their uncle because their uncle was 6'4", and they had a 5'7" dad. Do the math, that was not good. Brady was told early on, you look just like Uncle Scott. And he began praying then, 6'4", God, 6'4", please. Both boys wanted to be at least 6 feet tall. David's 5'11", Brady's 5'10". They'll never make it. And guess who they blame? We have some friends that we used to go to the beach with. He looked just like his dad. In fact, when we were first there, I remember watching them walk into the east along this very empty beach. And his wife said, when I see him walk, he looks just like his daddy. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, watch him. You see him? He said, the right arm is straight, the left arm is crooked. That's how he walked. Well, I guess a couple days later, his oldest son at the time was 19. They started walking down the beach, and it was classic. You got Joel on this side, you got his son here. They're both right arm is straight, the left arm's crooked. It was weird. It's like they really are. We often reflect that physically, but what usually brings that to a head, and people say, you're just like your dad, you're just like your mother, you're just like your grandfather. It's our actions and our behaviors. It's what we choose to do that reflect that character, the lessons we learned, how we were shaped. Now, the truth is known about you. You'd probably look at your own parents, and there are aspects about which you really lament and you don't want to be like your parents. In fact, it's very natural during teenage years to go, I don't want to be like my parents. But you probably will be, because that's who shaped you, that's who you were around, that's who you heard make decisions. And in the same way, when God created humankind, he imbued all of us with his image. There's a certain way you are to reflect that. And you, among all the creation, are given the charge to work. So why do we work? I want to give you just a few reasons we work that may anchor you as you're doing your work or pursuing a career someday and trying to decide what that's like. First one reason is you're designed to work. You work because you're designed to work. You have the resemblance of your Creator who did work when he called everything into being. Second, your world needs your work. He commissions the man to work because the whole world needed it. It would be tended like a garden. Third, our own need is fulfilled when we work. It's interesting, he says every fruit-bearing tree is here for your food, but he never details the delivery mechanism from the limb of the tree to your mouth. That would involve that human being involved and active in doing things. It's not just that he magically pops things into your life to care for you. He entrusts all kinds of resources, and he says, go take it, go eat it. Fourth, this is what you find out in the New Testament. You travel forward in time in the New Testament, you find that the gospel travels through your work. Many of us, have memorized the Great Commission. It says, go make disciples of all the nations. The language actually is this: going, or as you go, you make disciples. There's this presumption that you're going to be going throughout your world. You're going to be having a host of relationships. And just by the math of it, you're going to spend most of your time around people with whom you work. The gospel travels through work. If you read the prophets and you read the letters of Paul, you find also we work because the compassion, justice, and beauty and character of God are expressed in our work. All those things are true, that our values, the character of God, it gets fleshed out. In fact, if you read the Old Testament prophets, when you didn't see the integrity, you didn't see the honesty, you didn't see that done well, every prophet was raised up to condemn it and call people back to living the character and the values and the compassion of God. Now, all those are true. All those are biblical. You look at how God uses work in our lives. That can be your why. And they flex. Some of you will say, I really resonate with that because I see in my work that I do that. And some of you look and say, Bruce, I really have a hard time finding into that. And I'll add another one that I had never considered that came from a guy named Tom Bergstrom. He wrote in his book, The GEO Principle, he says, I think one of the reasons why we work is it's designed to bring us closer to God. Now, some of you may be thinking about your workplace, and you think, yeah, Bruce, if you spent 15 minutes in the place I work, you'd realize you have to do a lot of praying just to get through that day of work. If you knew the people I work with, yeah, I draw close to God because they're not going to make it. One of us is not going to make it through the day. God just keeps me from wringing their necks. Or you may be in a job where you think, every day when I do what I do, I realize it's really clear, wherever you are in that spectrum, part of why we work is God is drawing us close to himself. I remember when I was young, my granddad would take me out on the farm to do work with him. In fact, I'd probably say every single one of you could think to a time when somebody who was older in your family invited you into a task or a project at the house or on the farm. Your dad said, hey, come help me with the car in the garage. Your mom said, hey, you want to help me make dinner? Or, hey, I'm building this. Let's go do this. It wasn't just because they were going to be able to do it more quickly with you. In fact, you were going to slow them down. They did it because they wanted you to be a part of their world. My granddad was a farmer. And I can remember in my earliest memories of life being between his arms, standing in that little wheel well that's between the seat and the steering wheel of a John Deere tractor, a 3210 to be specific. And I would put my hands on that wheel, and my granddad would put his arms around that. My granddad was a German man that was about 5'8", 5'9", but he was tough as nails, and he could outwalk anybody in the fields. Worked really, really hard, and I remember standing in that wheel well with my hands helping him drive that tractor and go all over that place. Now, I know that may sound alarming with all that powerful equipment that's behind you, but in those days we didn't have seatbelts either, so it was just part of the average. But I remember going out with my granddad, and we'd go and put out grain or hay or whatever we needed to do. We'd go and get this mixer going. We went all over that farm. I can remember going out with my granddad, and we'd feed range cubes to the cows. And they were cottonseed meal cubes, hardened cubes. And every once in a while, I'd see him pick one up and put it in his jaw. And I'd pick one up too. But I wanted to be like my granddad. I was with him. So by the time I was in high school, I had an opportunity to work on a farm, and I embraced it because that was my heritage. I'd seen him do it. I'm convinced that a lot of those things were not just to teach us things, but so we could be side by side with these people who cared for us. Bergstrom argues, one of the things we do when we work is it gives us a chance to know and be with God. You think about the Gospels. You read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These are not books that are just chock full of things to do. You don't have sermon after sermon after sermon. They're all different. Every page is slightly different. What's going on? Sometimes he's healing the sick. Sometimes he's walking on the road. Sometimes he's in the boat fishing with them. There are all kinds of things involved in that, but it's not a compendium of all these instructions you follow. Instead, the Gospels are a picture of him. And one thing is consistent. Wherever he is, the disciples are there too. He invites them. He teaches them. He models for them. He coaches them. He disciplines them. He calls them to deeper faith. He intervenes for them. But the number one thing is he is with them. And I find that now, all these centuries later, when I open those Gospels, I see a person that I want to know, that invites me into relationship with him. And so everything I do every single day is a part of walking with him. Just as the disciples every day, whatever was going to happen, they were going to be with him. I think he was right. That one of the reasons that we work is that we can grow closer to God. To join his creative work. To live out your unique design in his image. To use good skills and talents that you were given. All these reasons that you see, to provide for yourself, provide for your world, to be part of his creative work, all those things are part of why we work. But make no mistake, friends, to work is one of the vital expressions of what it means to be human, made in the image of God. And I don't know a time when we needed to be reminded of that more than today. Last fall, late summer, Christianity Today ran an article that was extremely provocative to me. It was written by two guys, Kevin Brown and Stephen McMullen, and they were collaborating on this, talking about what is happening in the work world we live in today. They said, and I quote, "A mounting body of research," and they noted Citigroup, Oxford University, and MIT, "a mounting body of research suggests that the labor market is in the middle of a pivot. A pivot that is already being casually referred to as the fourth great industrial revolution." And that pivot, that revolution, is automation. The repetitive tasks humans have always done are being replaced with things that can be far more consistent, far more efficient, and they can do all those things faster, with more productivity than any human ever could. That pivot point is asking the question, if God created us for real work, then how do we relate to this automated world? You go to USMD for cancer treatment, for a surgery because you have prostate cancer, a robot will be the one that delivers the actual mechanism. You go into a company where you're having something manufactured, you will see machines of incredible design that are producing certain repetitive things faster than any human could. And it begs the question, does that mean we will have a humanless economy in the future? They quoted University of North Carolina professor, computer science pioneer Fred Brooks, and he argued this. He said, quote, "The human ability to exercise judgment and care for others is a non-transferable asset. No robot can do that. A robot, a machine cannot make decisions. They can do calculations. They can evaluate based on predetermined coefficients and inputs, but they cannot judge. And they certainly cannot care. No machine will ever have their hearts moved and never have a judgment to say, I know this will be more efficient, but the cost to the human capital is too great. I choose not to do that. You will always be essential. It has been so since the beginning of time. Why? Because only that which was created in God's image has the ability to do what the Creator alone can do, and that is to love. I spent a great deal of my time during doctoral work looking at the nature of work, of the workplace, and how things work. And some of my favorite authors and descriptions of that saw work as service, work and leadership as stewardship. One author I read last week said, in its greatest expression and its most foundational value, when you work as part of God's plan, your work is actually love. You're loving the world God created. And He is using you as His instruments to carry that out. Now, you may not see yourself as expressing that compassion, that love. You may look at your own job and say, Prendel, you have no idea what you're talking about, because in my role, I just can't see it. You may have no idea about how what you do or what you dream of doing someday will fit with His creative purpose, how He could ever really do something significant through it. There are some jobs that feel that way. We'll talk about this a whole lot more next week, but I will tell you that how you do that job in and of itself will speak volumes of the source of your humanity. It will be the book that people will read. They will look at you and how you work and what you do and how you relate to each other. If you're treating people with respect, you're showing compassion, you're doing a job faithfully, whether somebody's looking or not, it speaks volumes. And you need to know everything in Scripture says God is pleased and honored by that. We'll talk more about that next week, but the song I hear over and over, how do I know I'm going to make a difference? It's what I do really mean anything. You know, Christmas has just passed, and every holiday we spend time as a family watching favorite movies. You probably do too. One of my favorites that usually we see at the holiday time is It's a Wonderful Life. And it's a story about a wonderful young man of character who tends to protect everyone he loves. His name is George Bailey. And George has this character, this tenacious character, where he is going to stand up for what is right. He's going to be protective of those he loves, and he has big dreams, big hopes, always thinking way out there about what could happen. And juxtaposed against his character and his good intent is the malcontent of Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter is a man who owns most of the properties in town. He is a person that is self-absorbed in the deepest way in his own greed. And if I really told you what I think of him, I wouldn't be able to do it in a church. He has incredible malice toward everybody and everything he can't own and hold. George spends his life confronting Mr. Potter. He stands, in fact, instead of leaving home to do all those dreamy things he once thought he would do, he finds himself carrying on his now deceased father's business. And his business is this, that he helps provide a chance for those with marginal financial means to actually experience the dignity of having their own home. Even as he's ushering people into these homes, what bothers him is a sense of impact. What have I ever really accomplished? What did I ever do that really meant something? He wants so desperately to be significant, to have an impact, but he can't see it. And then George receives the gift of a great miracle. He is given the privilege of seeing what the world would be like if he had never been born. I wrote down these thoughts. He finds out that his brother never would have lived beyond childhood because he wasn't there to rescue him from an accident. He finds out that his father's stroke would have left his mother penniless, destitute, and bitter. He finds out that because he wasn't there, the forgetful, goofy uncle doesn't just bumble through life, but he spends the rest of his life in an insane asylum. He finds out that the vicious greed of Mr. Potter would never have gone unchecked by George's ferocious will and justice and compassion. He had big impact. George's life had huge impact. He simply could not see it. Now, please hear me. You will never be able to gauge the impact of your own life. Call it the forest for the trees syndrome. Call it too close to be objective. You'll never be able to see it. Only one really will be able to gauge the impact of your life, and his opinion is the only one that really matters. You won't know. You will not know if that patient really does find a new life because of their mobility. You won't know if what you did to create something beautiful to remind them of a holiday or a sentiment will really make a difference. You won't know if your business acumen really made a difference with all of your employees. You won't know if what you did in your narrow slice of life really made a difference. You won't know what kind of teammate you are really made a difference. You won't know if all the things you worked so hard to do really reached out to touch your world well. You won't know. In fact, history will cover up everything you've ever done eventually. Everything will be buried by history. But there is one who will know, and he's the only one that matters. And time after time in these pages, you have a window into that moment when you find out what your impact was. And the King of the universe, in whose image you were made, proclaims to his children as we cross the threshold of heaven these words: well done. Well done. Enter into your master's happiness. Well done. And welcome home. It is as absolutely fundamental to the human condition as anything ever has been that you want to know that what you do means something. But I'm afraid, friends, and we will talk about some of the avenues that are available to us in just a few weeks. But today, you have one decision to make. It is whether or not you will trust your Maker to take what you do and make it significant, to judge it as worthy, and to affirm it because you're his kid. That's really what you have to decide. And you have to then trust him that he knows and he'll see and he'll work beyond what you can see in ways you will never know. I cannot tell you how many times someone has come to me through the years and said that they received a note or a phone call or they went to a funeral and somebody out of the blue said, "You probably don't remember this." When we were in high school together, do you remember when this happened? And the person almost always says, vaguely. You did this. And it made a huge impact on me. I've never forgotten it. And I just wanted to thank you. It is as regular a pattern as any I've ever seen in life. You don't know. You don't know what small kindness. You don't know what small step of service. You don't know what favor you did. You don't know what defense you came to. You don't know what small statement you made. But he does. And that person that's on the receiving end does. I write a blog every week, and I have a boss that I had when I was in high school, and Monday through Friday, we worked 70 to 75 hours, and then we worked on Saturday, and we went to church together, and we worked Sunday afternoon. It was a long process. It was many decades ago. I've never been in a position to say to him, I'm so grateful for the work you gave me, but I am. If I see him again, I'll be glad to tell him. We don't know what impact we make. And we always think it's something big. It's not. It's almost always the small things. Will you remember which time you were making lunch for your kids that it meant the world? Will you remember which time you walked up next to your mom and said, Mom, thanks for doing this for me, that it meant something? Will you remember that client that was treated with dignity, that your kindness meant something? Oh, friends, you will never see it. But there is one who will. And you realize that he's the only one that really matters. What you have to decide is, will you trust him with it? I hope you will. Because there's a day coming not too far away for all of us when we'll be clamoring to hear those same words. Well done. Enter your master's happiness. Well done. And welcome home. That's why we work. Would you pray with me? Father, if I just took 1 hour of my day to write down the people who had impact on me, I would still be writing at the end of that hour. Lives touch lives, and we see you at work. Father, there are folks here today whose life was made possible because two people found each other and fell in love. There are people who have careers that have been created and sustained because somebody believed in them enough to take a risk on hiring them. There are some who've created incredible futures because they were trained and given encouragement by men and women who simply taught them how to read or to add and subtract. People who taught them how to lead and manage projects, taught them how to live with integrity, taught them how to grab life and the opportunities that were before them and trust you in them. And Father, I know that none of those would be possible if you had not made us in your image and granted to us the chance to be called your children. So for every man and woman, boy and girl in this place who does now, once did, or will ever work, God, we ask that you just give them a taste of what you're up to in their lives and what you want to do in your creative process through them and in them. Lord, you gave your Son for us, gave the whole world for us. And your scripture says very clearly that what you wanted from us was to give you our life's trust. So I pray right now for some in this room who know about you but don't know you. They read about what you've done, but they've never taken the step to put their trust in you. And today I pray that this would be a day they'll take a step toward you, that they'd believe you really do have good intentions toward them, that you have a plan, that you are on a journey to claim them as your own. I pray you give them courage to take the step to trust you today. For all of us who are in that work world or preparing for that work world, I pray that you'll give us confidence that whether we can see it or not, you are at work in what we do. And I pray you give us courage to do it with such excellence that people would be able to read your character in our own. And now, Father, because we work, we render to you our offerings. And I pray that even today, how we do that and why we do that would be pleasing to you. Use these offerings, both of our lives and our resources, to bring honor and glory to your Son who gave himself for us. We pray in his name today. Amen.